Hey, church family, welcome to another day of going through the Psalms. Today we are on Psalm 127. This psalm gives us a lot of encouragement for what it looks like to labor, to work. So I hope that if you are watching this on Monday or at any point during the week, it provides you some encouragement as you go about your work. Let's look at Psalm 127 together. 127, a song of ascents of Solomon. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruits of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. So, Psalm 127 is pretty clearly a psalm dealing with labor in these first two verses, and then dealing with family and specifically children in the last three verses. We're going to look at just the first two today. And this is because this applies to everybody, right? We all do a lot of work, whether we're working in the professional world, working as a student in school, or even working in the home in some capacity. Life requires work. And we have to remember that this work is not inherently a bad thing. Work was instituted by God in Genesis 1 before the fall, but it was with sin that brought toil and strife to our work. Notice here, though, in the first two verses, there are three things that are in vain if you do them apart from the Lord. Building a house is in vain, watching over the city is in vain, and even labor of all kinds, right? Anything you do between rising up early and going to bed late is in vain. Now, interestingly, he talks about building the house, watching over the city. Some of us are literally doing this today. Building houses, watching over the city. But the psalmist here has a pretty broad sense in mind, right? Because essentially all activities in the ancient world would have taken place in this sense, right? Of building the house, doing things associated with housekeeping. This would have included things like subsistence farming, things like that, as well as watching over the city, right? Participating in the life of society. And the psalmist makes this pretty explicit when he says in verse 3 that anything you do, right, with anxious toil between rising up early and going late to rest is in vain apart from the Lord. But look at this promise at the end of verse 2 that I hope you have time to reflect on today. God gives to his beloved rest, right? This is God's promise to us explicitly here, that we will work ourselves to death if we think that we're going to find something in our work that we can only find in the Lord. We're going to work ourselves to death if we try to prove something about ourselves that only the Lord can prove in us. So that's the explicit promise, right? That God gives rest to those whom he loves. But there's an implicit promise here too that I don't want us to miss. If the work done not without the Lord is in vain, the work done with the Lord is never in vain. And that's the implicit promise of the psalm, and it's actually a promise that's made explicit in the New Testament book of 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, it says this: "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." So friends, whatever we do today, tomorrow, for the rest of the week, let's turn our labors to the Lord, believing that he is the one that gives meaning and fulfillment to our work, not the accolades we gain from society or from other people. So let us work abundantly for the Lord, being steadfast and immovable.